We all want people to absolutely fall in love with our app or product. And after helping apps reach millions of downloads and get featured by Apple, I've learned it comes down to a few simple principles that anyone can use. Today, I'm sharing exactly what they are so you can build products that your users will love with little to no design experience necessary. And some of these might just surprise you. I'm Maxine, I spent 15 years in tech and I help founders build products that people love. So let's get started. Now, what is UX and why is it so important? Well, UX stands for user experience, and it encompasses, quite simply put, everything that a user or customer experiences when they're using your product or app. Now, the part where a lot of people kind of misunderstand it is they conflict it with design. Now, good design is incredibly important and a really interesting aspect of any product that you build. But the thing about UX is it really thinks about the goal that someone is trying to accomplish and trying to make that journey or that path as intuitive and as simple as possible. So, a comparison that I love to draw is that typically speaking, when you come into a household, at least especially a Western household, you end up in some kind of hallway or main entryway. And from there, you can go into other rooms. So you can open a door and go to a bedroom, you can open a door and go to a bathroom. Now, it'd be really strange if you opened the front door and you walk straight into a bathroom. And then you open another door and you go into a garage. And then you open another door and you go into a bedroom. And then from the bedroom, you go into the kitchen. None of that would make sense to us in the way that we're used to things. And it's very similar when you think about UX. It's how do you lay out everything that so when you are moving through a space, the next steps are intuitive and you have an understanding of what lies behind door number 1, door number 2. Because every time we click a button or we press something, right, we have an expectation of what's going to come after. And if that really is very jarring and it's different than what we had anticipated, it feels really clunky. And that is an example of bad UX. Now, it's incredibly important because a lot of people tend to not use your product again once they feel they've had a really bad experience. And so this idea of good UX and good experience is so crucially important because it allows you to achieve your business goals and it allows people to fall in love with your product and get out of the product that which you are promising. So, what are these simple principles that you can keep in the back of your mind as you're starting to work on your product? Well, first and foremost is to stick to proven patterns because it's so rare that you need to reinvent the wheel. So if you're thinking about a web shop, for example, there's almost always a basket at the top right-hand corner. There is almost always a row or a grid of pictures of different products. Typically speaking, the most relevant information to surface at top level is what the product is and how much it's going to cost you. Again, there's certain ways that you will try and find or search for a product. All these pieces of UX are kind of standardized at this point. And so reinventing the wheel here and thinking that it's really funky and cool design to put a basket in the middle of the page is probably not going to be to your advantage. There's been a trend recently. There are some clothing brands that have really revamped their website. These are really, really big brands and it's quite cool to see because they're trying to, I think, incorporate this idea and this feeling of a magazine where you get to really experience the kind of latest collection and you can interact with that before you end up on the kind of traditional web shop. But these are brands that have teams and teams and teams behind these kind of changes who are tweaking things as they go, testing everything, making sure that they're still hitting their targets and their revenue goals. And it's not really feasible for a founder who is trying to build their first product as best and as beautifully as possible to be reinventing the wheel. So have a look at what it is that you're creating. Is it an app? Is it a website? Is it a shopping experience? Content consumption experience? Is it like say a meditation experience? What are the typical patterns that are associated with that and try and keep the UX as simple as possible because it reduces the friction that people experience when they're trying to figure out how to use your product. Now, the next simple thing that you can do is to do customer or user research. Now, this is a whole topic in and of itself, and there'll be more videos coming out about that. But in short, user research allows you to better understand your customer, but more importantly, understand their mental model. The mental model is not just how people think, it's almost as if you have a peek behind the scenes of their decision-making algorithm. So how are they deciding what's worth paying for and what isn't? How are they deciding how to use a product? What do they think, to the point of earlier, lies behind door number 1 or door number 2? What are they scanning for? How are they behaving when they're interacting with your product? The better you understand that and you can map that, you can then anticipate their expectations better by changing and adapting your design and your UX. So the more user research you do, the better you understand them, and then it becomes a bit like you're designing a product that can read their mind, which is the ultimate way to deliver such a magical and spot-on user experience. This also works really well when you're working on what is an objectively difficult user experience challenge. For example, when I worked at SwiftKey, this was a keyboard that you could install on your phone, and we were launching the iOS version, or for the first time it was coming to iPhone, and it had a bit of a complicated setup process. So you would download the app, you had to then open the app and understand some stuff about it. Then you had to go into the settings, several levels deep, change a bunch of settings, accept a bunch of things, go back to the app. It was effectively a 13-step onboarding process, which most of the time you want to avoid. You want to keep your onboarding as small and as swiftly as possible. Despite this, we were testing every single week for 12 weeks, and by the end, on the first day, firstly we had 1 million downloads, which was incredible, but out of those 1 million people, 83% of people were able to successfully install the keyboard. That is a huge onboarding success rate, and something we only managed to get because we were testing every single week and making adjustments as we went. It was simply too big a thing to leave up to fate. It was something that instead, by testing regularly, we could understand where the hiccups were, where things were unclear to people, and make sure that we were creating the most frictionless onboarding process as possible. Now, I will say most of the time folks tend to kind of cop out of UX by offering a ton of options. And this is principle number 3, don't do that, right? You're not doing your user a favor by giving them tons of options, because the thing is when you're faced with that, you end up experiencing as a user something called decision fatigue. Especially nowadays, people are tired, we already have a shorter attention span, and so the effort that it takes to understand the consequence of each of these options and what you should be going for and how you should decide, I'm pretty sure as I'm explaining that, you must understand as well, or you will feel some kind of resonance of, needing to sort through everything. That's kind of a hassle, right? And it's the exact same for your users. So offering them tons of options will cause them this feeling of decision fatigue, which means that the easiest choice to make at all is to put it off or not interact with it at all, which at the end of the day isn't helping you. If I'm honest, most of the time when I see this in products, I feel like it's kind of lazy. You need to be doing that research to then understand, okay, this is the most favorable configuration of options for someone, or perhaps if you are in situation A, this is what you need, and if you are in situation B, this is what you need. And here's how you can decide whether or not A or B is applicable to you, right? If you do all that work for them, it becomes really simple for a user to just say tap, click, go, and they can get on with using your product. And so make sure that you're keeping the amount of settings and options at a minimum, especially at the beginning of your product. It also, if I'm honest, really helps in terms of maintenance, because the fewer options you have, the fewer weird combinations you have to maintain and account for as you're making changes and updates to your product as you go along. The fourth tip that I've got for you, or principle, if you will, to think about, is to consider the full experience. Most of the time, we are thinking about our product. So as soon as you launch into the product, right, what can people do? How do they sign up? How do they do what I want them to do? Even that very often I see early stage founders kind of get tripped up on as well. But what most folks forget is the full experience. And so how do they find out about your product? How do they find out where to get it or how to download it? Then when they open it for the first time, what is that onboarding like? When they use it every day, what is that like? Do they get an email? What is that experience like? How does it work together with your product? If you have a shop, for example, and you're also selling a physical product, right? What is that experience receiving it like? What if something happens to it? How easy is it to mark something as lost or get a refund or talk to your customer service? This is a lot in the beginning, and you don't necessarily have to perfect every single item. But when you think about a customer journey and all the touch points that they have with you, including using your product, you can see where are there ways that we can add a bit of magic, or more importantly, ways that we can reduce friction. So the full user journey is a really key piece. A very obvious example here is Apple, right? A lot of people have talked about the Apple unboxing experience. It's so easy to get the foil off, and there's a little tag, and there's a little weight and this resistance when you open the box, and there are all these little things that they've thought about so that you don't just get excited for the product that you've just purchased. The whole experience of unboxing it becomes synonymous with how they want you to feel about their product. Now, you may not have that budget, you may not be able to create this, slow moving magical box, but I'm pretty sure that if you map out the entire experience, you can find 2 or 3 things to improve for your user that will make it feel just that more frictionless and that more magical. Now, what I've walked you through so far doesn't require you to be a designer necessarily. However, if you are working on a tech product, I would really recommend setting aside some budget to work with a UX designer. This is their specialty. They'll be thinking about this full user experience, and oftentimes it makes so many other things easier as well. While it might seem like an extra cost, having a UX designer and fronting that before you go into development allows you to actually save money down the line. You get to hone in on features and kind of iterate before you end up working with developers who are much more expensive from a day-to-day basis. Not only that, but it's more work to create a feature. So if you then create that feature, you end up changing it, you end up changing it again because it wasn't quite what you wanted, or it wasn't quite what the user wanted, you will have wasted so much more time and money in that process than doing it ahead of time with a designer in a design tool that's a bit quicker to get through that kind of thinking process. So it's cheaper to iterate. It's also easier for developers to implement. There is a lot less that is undefined. Typically speaking, when you're a founder and you're trying to explain the kind of product that you're looking for or what you'd like, there is a lot there that's left for interpretation, especially when we're limited to only really using words to convey this. With a designer, you will have a full sketched out, layout and journey or flow of the entire product, which makes it easier for developers to go and then create that. So again, it's another area where you might be saving some time and some money. Also, at the end of the day, it's better for customer retention, and you will probably see higher revenues because it's easier for folks to, as I mentioned, achieve the goal or achieve the promise that you've set out, which in turn, if you're running your business well, should mean that you can make more money. And at the end of the day, that's what I want for you as a founder. For you to build products that people love, but also build businesses that you love and can sustain. Now, if you want to learn how to run your own user research so that you can really deliver that ultimate magical experience, stay tuned because there's lots of resources coming for you shortly.